The hum of the airplane engines was a steady lullaby, drowning out the chatter of passengers settling into their seats. Amara clutched her 6-month-old daughter, Lila, to her chest, her arms aching from the weight of the baby and the oversized diaper bag slung over her shoulder. At 22, Amara was a single mother with eyes that carried the weariness of sleepless nights and a heart heavy with dreams she'd tucked away. Her worn sneakers scuffed the narrow aisle as she made her way to her seat in Economy 34B on a red-eye flight from Chicago to Los Angeles. She hadn't planned to be here, squeezed into a middle seat with a baby who was already fussing. The trip was a last-minute decision, a desperate leap to visit her estranged aunt in California, the only family she had left who might help her get back on her feet. Amara's savings had dwindled to nothing, her job at the diner barely covering rent, and the eviction notice taped to her apartment door last week had been the final push. She'd scraped together just enough for a one-way ticket, praying for a miracle. As she settled into her seat, Lila let out a soft whimper, her tiny fist waving in protest. Amara rocked her gently, whispering, "Shh, baby girl, we're okay," though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The man in the aisle seat, a middle-aged businessman engrossed in his laptop, barely glanced her way. To her right, by the window, a figure was already seated, but Amara was too focused on calming Lila to notice much beyond the expensive-looking suit jacket draped over the armrest. The plane took off, and Lila's cries softened into sleepy gurgles. Amara's eyelids grew heavy, the exhaustion of the past week, packing, worrying, surviving, pulling her under. She leaned back, cradling Lila, and before she knew it, her head tilted to the side, resting against something solid and warm. She didn't question it. Sleep was a rare gift, and she took it. Hours later, a gentle nudge stirred her awake. Amara blinked, disoriented, her cheek pressed against the soft fabric of a suit jacket. Lila was still nestled in her arms, miraculously asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling. Amara's eyes darted to her right, and her breath caught. The man in the window seat wasn't just any passenger. His face was unmistakable. Ethan Caldwell, the billionaire CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, whose photo had been plastered across every business magazine she'd ever seen at the diner. His sharp jawline, piercing blue eyes, and perfectly tousled dark hair were even more striking in person. But what shocked her wasn't his identity. It was the sight of his hand, steady and gentle, resting on Lila's back, as if he'd been helping keep her secure while Amara slept. A neatly folded blanket, one of the airline's scratchy ones, was tucked around Amara's shoulders, and a small bottle of formula, warmed and ready, sat in the seat pocket in front of her. Her diaper bag, which had been a chaotic mess when she boarded, was now organized, with a pacifier and a rattle placed neatly on top. Oh my God, Amara stammered, sitting up straight, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." Ethan raised a hand, his smile warm but reserved. "No need to apologize. You both looked like you needed the rest." His voice was calm, with a hint of a New England accent, and his eyes softened as they flicked to Lila. She's a good sleeper when she's comfortable. Amara's mind raced. How long had she been leaning on him? Had she drooled? And why was a man like Ethan Caldwell, who probably had a private jet, flying commercial and economy? She glanced at the formula bottle, then back at him. "Did you do all this?" He shrugged, almost sheepishly. "The flight attendant was busy, and I figured you could use a hand. I've got a niece about her age, so I know the drill." Amara's throat tightened. She wasn't used to kindness from strangers, especially not from men who looked like they owned half the world. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching Lila a little closer. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if he saw something she hadn't meant to reveal, maybe the fear in her eyes, or the way her hands trembled slightly. "Everyone needs help sometimes," he said simply, then turned to look out the window, giving her space. The rest of the flight passed quietly. Lila stirred only once, and Ethan, without a word, handed Amara the warm bottle. Their fingers brushed, and Amara felt a strange warmth, not just from the bottle but from the gesture itself. She wanted to ask him why he was being so kind, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she fed Lila, stealing glances at him as he typed on his phone, his expression focused yet unreadable. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, Amara braced herself for the chaos of disembarking with a baby and no plan. As passengers shuffled toward the exit, Ethan stood, slipping on his jacket. He turned to her, his height imposing yet somehow comforting. "Do you have someone picking you up?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. Amara hesitated. The truth was, she had no one. Her aunt hadn't even answered her last call, and and Amara wasn't sure if she'd be welcome when she showed up unannounced. "I'll figure it out," she said, forcing a smile. Ethan nodded, but there was a flicker of something in his expression: concern, maybe, or curiosity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, simple and elegant, with just his name and a phone number. "If you need anything while you're in LA, call me. I mean it." She took the card, her fingers brushing the embossed text. "Why are you doing this?" she blurted, unable to hold back the question any longer. "You don't even know me." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "Because I've been where you are, not exactly, but close enough. And someone helped me once. I'm just paying it forward." Before she could respond, he gave her a small nod and disappeared into the crowd. Amara stood there, clutching his card, feeling like she'd just woken up from a dream. Lila cooed, and Amara snapped back to reality. She had to keep moving. The next few days were a blur of struggle. Her aunt's house was a cramped, cluttered bungalow in a rundown part of the city. Aunt Clara, a chain-smoking woman with a sharp tongue, wasn't thrilled about Amara's arrival. "I ain't got room for you and a baby," she'd said, but grudgingly let them stay on a lumpy couch. Amara spent her days scouring job listings and her nights soothing Lila, who seemed to sense her mother's anxiety. The business card stayed in her pocket, untouched but never far from her thoughts. A week later, with no job prospects and Clara's patience wearing thin, Amara hit a breaking point. She sat on the couch, Lila asleep in her lap, and stared at Ethan's card. Calling him felt like admitting defeat, but what else could she do? With a shaky breath, she dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "Ethan Caldwell." "Hi, it's Amara." "From the flight," she said, her voice small. "I'm sorry to bother you, but where are you?" He interrupted, his tone urgent but kind. She gave him the address, expecting him to offer advice or maybe a referral to some charity. Instead, he said, "Stay put. I'll be there in an hour." True to his word, a sleek black car pulled up outside Clara's house 60 minutes later. Ethan stepped out, still in a suit but less polished than on the plane, his sleeves rolled up and his hair slightly mussed. Amara met him at the door, Lila in her arms, feeling like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't quite grasp. "I'm not here to play hero," he said, reading her hesitation, "but I can help you get settled. I know a place where you and Lila can stay, no strings attached. It's a shelter my company funds, safe, clean, with resources to help you find work." Amara's pride screamed at her to say no, but the weight of Lila in her arms silenced it. "Okay," she whispered. The shelter was nothing like she'd imagined. It was bright and welcoming, with private rooms, a play area for kids, and staff who treated Amara like she mattered. Ethan didn't linger. He introduced her to the director, made sure she was settled, and left with a quiet, "You've got this." But over the next few weeks, he checked in. A call here, a quick visit there, always with a reason, a new job training program his company was piloting, or a daycare slot that had just opened up. Amara began to piece together Ethan's story, bit by bit. He'd grown up in foster care, clawing his way to success through sheer grit. The magazines never mentioned that part, only his billions and his business acumen. But to Amara, he was the man who'd warmed a bottle for her daughter, who'd seen her at her lowest and didn't look away. Months passed, and Amara found her footing. She landed a job as a receptionist at a small marketing firm, enrolled in night classes, and moved into a tiny but cozy apartment with Lila. Ethan's visits became less frequent, but their connection grew, coffee meetings that turned into long conversations, his guarded demeanor softening with every story they shared. One evening, as they sat in a park watching Lila toddle toward a pigeon, Amara turned to him. "Why me?" she asked, echoing her question from the plane. "You could help anyone. Why keep showing up for us?" Ethan looked at Lila, then back at Amara, his eyes steady. "Because you reminded me of someone I used to be, someone who just needed one person to believe in them. And because," he hesitated, a rare crack in his composure, "because you and Lila feel like home." Amara's heart stuttered. She hadn't expected that, hadn't dared to hope for it. But as she looked at him, at the man who'd quietly changed her life, she realized she felt it too. Not love, not yet, but something deeper, a trust, a warmth, a possibility. They didn't kiss or make grand promises. Instead, they sat in silence, watching Lila chase another pigeon, the world feeling a little less heavy. Amara didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she believed it could be good. And that was enough.